to keep yours and learn to become a successful trader. Traders Corner, weekly on Summit.
Andrew Canter, CIO at Future Growth Asset Management, has raised the red flag over ratings agencies for years. Now the U.S. Department of Justice is looking at their role in the global financial crisis and looking for billions of dollars worth of damages. Before we chat to Andrew, though, let's take a quick look at the case.
The U.S. is suing ratings agency Standard & Poor's for $5 billion in a civil lawsuit. The Department of Justice claims Standard & Poor's inflated ratings of mortgage securities before and during the financial crisis, that they falsely claimed ratings were objective, and that they aimed to get more business from banks. Between 2004 and 2007, Standard & Poor's issued $1 trillion worth of ratings and charged up to $750,000 on some issues. Attorney General Eric Holder calls their conduct egregious. This is the first action against a credit rating agency. 16 states and Washington, D.C. are also suing Standard & Poor's. The ratings agency claims government cherry-picked emails and that ratings are protected by the First Amendment. They've hired First Amendment lawyer Floyd Abrams.
Well, on the line now is Andrew Canter, Chief Investment Officer at Future Growth Asset Management. Andrew, thanks very much for your time this evening.
Evening, Julieta.
Do you think, are you surprised actually that it took so long for the U.S. government to have a go at the ratings agencies, specifically Standard & Poor's?
It is a little bit surprising. I mean, you're talking, 4 or 5 years down the line, although one has a sense that, as you've been seeing sort of leaks of what kind of information was coming out from within the ratings agencies themselves, mostly from email, that the case was being building. And it also sounds like there's been an ongoing negotiation between the Department of Justice in the U.S. and Standard & Poor's to try and avoid this thing coming out into court.
So what do you make of their case? Do you think it's a fair one? The U.S. has called it, or the ratings agencies, or Standard & Poor's particularly, their actions egregious. Would you agree?
Look, I mean, from my perspective, I'm not, yes, but it's very hard. It's probably not fair to judge the entire organization based on the sarcastic or sloppy emails of a relatively few people. But what is pretty clear is that the senior management of this organization, and probably others, by the way, were more worried about market share, maintaining market share in the face of competition, where firms were rating, investment banks and issuers were rating shopping to get the better ratings they could get, and it appears to have impaired the objectivity of the analytical process, and that's the Justice Department's claim. So yes, egregious is probably a good word.
Do you think it's also retaliatory? And I think that's possibly one of the lines of defense that the lawyers are taking for Standard & Poor's, that it's in retaliation for the fact that Standard & Poor's downgraded the U.S. last year.
Look, it's pretty clear the lawyers are clutching at various kinds of defenses. The first response was it's a First Amendment issue. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says I can have freedom of speech, I can say whatever I want. Of course, that's a completely spurious argument because these are professional organizations. What they say, they're being paid to say is professionals. It's like a doctor saying I can give you bad advice, and it gives you First Amendment protection. The second argument now is, they're just retaliating because we downgraded them. I think what most people are tight-lipped about is whether Moody's is next in line for this kind of treatment, and I suspect they are. It's just nobody's saying it. So I suspect there is no retaliatory issue going on here. And the third defense is, hey, come and prove it. Prove that our entire organization was motivated by market share and profit and not by diligence. And that's going to be the hard thing to prove, of course.
Andrew, we were chatting or exchanging emails. You talked about part of this being part of the great healing process following on from the financial crisis. Could you maybe elaborate on your views there?
Well, sure. I mean, the use and reliance on ratings globally and in South Africa, let's not kid ourselves, was deep and wide and in the end proven to be inappropriate. And that wasn't a surprise because the warning signs were there. As you said, we've been saying this for well over 10 years. It was very clear that there were biases coming through, that the ratings agents were apparently being skewed by issuers and arrangers and the merchant banks to inflate ratings or degrade terms. So it had to come to a head. And this is the healing process. It's not just this. It's the LIBOR scandals and the fines being paid and the banks, being forced to reevaluate their cultures and ethoses. So it is part of the healing process, and I don't think it's a terrible thing. And it has come home to South Africa in terms of legislation as well.
Well, yeah, bringing it back to South Africa, what, if anything, is the implication for ratings agencies here? Because we actually have a new, to some extent, regulating the ratings agencies.
Right. Now it's no longer a bill. It's been passed as the Credit Ratings Agency Act. It was passed at the end of last year and will be implemented quite soon. And what it basically does is it imposes a duty of independence, of care and diligence, of compliance. It's really quite a reasonable act that basically says you guys are going to provide a research service that other people rely on to make investments. At any extent, you better darn well do it right. And that's a good professional standard. Again, it's the same standard you'd impose on a lawyer giving advice. You must give good advice. Otherwise, it's malpractice. If you go to your doctor and he gives you bad advice, it's malpractice. And it introduces the concept of delictual liability. Actually, it doesn't introduce it. It's always been there, which is a negligence liability. If I can prove that you didn't do your job properly or to the standard you should have or could have, and you were negligent, and I can prove damages, I can sue you civilly. And that's what's going on in the U.S. right now.
Is there anything similar, the act that we've introduced, is similar in the United States or in Europe?
Well, that's what's really interesting is this is not South Africa alone. In fact, there were rumors that one of the large ratings agencies was not going to continue business in South Africa because this act is onerous. I don't think it's onerous. I've read it. But besides that, my attitude was, well, go somewhere else. You're going to find the exact same laws coming into force around the world now. South Africa's financial sector regulation is very much in tune with IOSCO, which is the global securities regulatory body, and central banks, and et cetera. There is going to be one global regulatory standard.
Andrew, I'm sorry. In fact, Bridget Taylor from Nedbank Capital is with me in studio, and she wanted me to ask a question, but I was trying to listen to you both at the same time. So, Bridget, you've got a question for Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. Just a quick one. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were with regards to, we all feel the same about the ratings agencies and the knock-on effects that it has on the economies by and large globally. However, I think that what we need to ask ourselves is the motive behind the ratings agencies in terms of how they rated in this regard would be the mortgage-backed securities, and what the onus is actually on the institution and obviously on the Federal Reserve with regards to their accountability in terms of that, that they're trying to portray and put on the shoulders of the ratings agencies. Surely it's a dual accountability issue.
Well, I would take the dual accountability onto the shoulders of the investors rather than regulators. The reality is, globally and domestically, investment managers came to rely on credit ratings as if it was a buy, hold, sell recommendation, and that is a dereliction of duty in my view. That would be the same as an equity manager listening to buy, hold, sell recommendation of a third-party analyst. I've got no problem with good third-party analysis. I've got no problem using and reading third-party analysis if it's done properly, relying on it, using it in regulations as was done. Oh, it's AA rated, I can buy it. It's BBB rated, I can't. That's just pathetic. And so I don't think anybody can lay the blame for all of this at the feet of the ratings agents. They were one cog in a badly broken wheel. And I think in South Africa now we've changed the regulation so that it's very clear in both Reg 28 for pension funds and CISCA for unit trust that institutional asset managers can no longer rely on official ratings as the arbiter of investment decisions.
Absolutely.
And it's going to force a better standard of credit analysis and skill by asset managers, and that's a good thing.
We have to leave there, unfortunately. Andrew, thanks very much for chatting to us this evening.
Evening.
That's Andrew Canter, Chief Investment Officer at Future Growth. Bridget, thanks for your question there. And time now for a look at our chart of the day. We said earlier that we would show you what the death of print means for digital, but here's the shocker. It doesn't mean very much. Although newspaper advertising is drying up, the money is not being transferred neatly over to online either. It is just drying up. This Business Insider chart shows revenues from print virtually halving since 2006, but the revenues for digital media shown here in red are more or less flat, and that is the stuff of nightmares for media houses. Be very you don't work for one. Bridget, last comment on the markets. Your point was made that if there is a rotation out of bonds, it'll go into equity. So do we just have this lovely floor of support for equity markets, irrespective of what actually is going on in the economy?
I think quite an interesting thing, and as Andrew was saying earlier, is that more and more players in the financial markets are taking accountability for how they assess value in terms of a portfolio that they're running with regards to a market that presents itself as we currently see it. So, in other words, we've got huge liquidity, we've got unbelievably strong levels on bonds, we've got equities that have, in a low growth environment, how do you sustain these kind of levels that we're seeing on the top side, and measuring those according to parameters that you've created to make you believe that there is still value within those realms. And whether that's relative value, whether it's it has sustainable momentum, and it's really gotten back down to people starting to really dig deep in terms of understanding business better and looking for viable options. And because of that, it creates a market that at the moment is a little bit sensitive because there's a lot of unknowns that still need to go through the system, things like the budget, things like understanding where monetary policy is going to go going forward, and those kind of things still have to be ironed out before we really can make a firm view with regards to our longer term picture.
Do your homework, basically. All right, Bridget, we have to leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us. That's Bridget Taylor, Head of Institutional Flow Sales at Nedbank Capital. Coming up after the break, it's Talking Technicals with Frans de Klerk, and you can start calling in 011-280-3899.
Growing a business is like being on a journey. You know where you want to go, but you don't always know the best way to get there. One thing's for sure, it's never easy. Journey, you need the right partner who takes the time to understand where you come from, where you're headed, and what it takes to get there. A partner who will walk with you no matter what. That's why I'm with Nedbank. They know it's not just me and my business on this journey. It's also my employees, my business partners, my family, and my community. There's still a great deal I wish to achieve, and I'm confident with Nedbank I can reach my goals.
Partnering for growth for a greater South Africa. Make things happen. Nedbank.
Make things happen.
Business IQ keeps you up to date on the latest industry news affecting your business, such as the volatile economic climate, trading conditions, technological advances, and lots more. Ensuring your business